Welcome to this panel discussion titled Securing Investment: Why Cybersecurity is a Key Imperative for FDI. Moderated by Ramya Faraj, Senior Presenter and Producer, Forbes Middle East. Our panelists are Bocar A, CEO, Samina, Telecommunications Council, Christopher Steed, Chief Investment Officer and Managing Director, Paladin Capital Group, Wael Fattouh, Chief Advisory Officer, Site.
Fattouh. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is wonderful to be joined today by these very esteemed panelists at yet another fantastic global cybersecurity forum. Thank you very much for being with us as well. And this session is really going to explore how cybersecurity has become a decisive factor in attracting global capital, in shaping investor confidence, and in long-term competitiveness. And Mr. Steed, at Paladin, you oversee global cybersecurity investments. So how are you really escalating cyber threats? How are these escalating cyber threats reshaping the way investors assess safe destinations for capital?
No, absolutely. I think it's a great question. And when we look at the international ecosystem of innovation, cybersecurity and having best practices around cybersecurity has become of the utmost importance. And to put that into context, for us at Paladin, we are dependent on waves of innovation. And back in the day, it was the cloud, and then it became the bring your own device to work, and then it was cryptocurrency, and then AI, and in the future, it'll be quantum, advanced robotics, and the space economy. With every new wave of innovation, what we generally see is that customers rush to buy without considering the risk that those technologies pose to those organizations. And so for us, when we are looking in the international ecosystem, and about 35% of our capital goes outside of the US market, we are looking for those types of companies, those types of geographies, those types of regions that take safety, security, and trust very seriously. And by way of example, let's say a nation wants to become one of the world's leaders in the manufacturing and the delivery of self-driving vehicles. And they put hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars into their own environment in order to kickstart that process of innovation. And the hope is that it will attract local private capital as well as international private capital. Now, the goal of that is to ultimately sell that self-driving car to the consumer. But if that consumer cannot 100% verify that that self-driving vehicle is going to stop at a stoplight when it sees a stoplight, they are simply not going to buy. And from a private capital perspective, that brings the ROI from our investment dollars down to zero. And for that nation that is now becoming more dependent on innovation for GDP growth, that hits the bottom line from a GDP growth standpoint. And so for us, when we are exploring international geographies, particularly places like the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, we've been coming here for the last 10 years, and what we have seen is that at the long-term economic goals of the nation are becoming more dependent, and there is a commitment to cybersecurity, safety, security, and trust. And a lot of what that translates to us is when it says made in KSA on the back of the box, people rush to buy, not just because it's the best of breed innovation, but it was designed and built with safety, security, and trust in mind.
That's really a testament to what has been achieved in the kingdom, and thank you for sharing that anecdote. If it says Saudi on the box, you buy. Mr. Ba, how does the security and resilience of telecom and digital infrastructure really shape regional competitiveness for FDI?
Thank you for the question, and I think it's important when we start this conversation to have a correlation between cyber security and foreign direct investment. And usually when foreign direct investment is discussed, the conversation often gravitates toward the conventional benchmark, which are political stability, macroeconomic resilience, and a predictable regulatory environment. But today, in our interconnected world, there is a new dimension shaping the investor confidence, which is cybersecurity and digital resilience. This is a foundation for investment. Why? Because telecom and digital infrastructure are now the nervous system of every single economy. And if the system is vulnerable, it undermines the reliability of everything built upon it, from banking and payment system, logistics, healthcare, and even sometimes national defense. So investors have begun to treat cybersecurity as a part of the sovereign risk analysis. The same way they measure inflation or a fiscal deficit, now they ask a simple question. Is this country's digital backbone resilient? Are there any safeguards against disruption? Now, the market that can confidently answer yes to that question are seen as a lower risk, more predictable, and therefore more attractive for long-term investment. And the reverse is also true. Countries that appear vulnerable, they face a higher, let's say, borrowing cost, higher insurance premium, and a slower flow of foreign direct investment. So let me just give you a number of facts. The World Bank estimates that cybercrime already costs the global economy over $6 trillion annually, which is equivalent to the third largest economy in the world. So no investor will ignore that level of exposure. So the conclusion is clear to your question. Resilience in telecom and digital infrastructure is not just now a narrow technical issue, it is a determinant of competitiveness in attracting global investment in the country or in the region.
Infrastructure resilience is really now inseparable from economic competitiveness, we could say. And Mr. Fattouh, what dimensions of cyber readiness are really most important in positioning Saudi and the wider region as an investment hub?
Thank you, Ramya. And thank you all for attending. I hope we can keep it interesting enough for the attendees. There's many dimensions that make Saudi and the region very attractive for foreign investment. But if for time's sake, let's pick two, the two main ones. One is the main theme for our conference, the capabilities that exist in the market organically. There has been huge investment by the National Cybersecurity Authority and us at site programs, thousands of young Saudis, men and women, through graduates, undergraduates, PhDs that are specializing in AI and data and advanced cybersecurity. All of these programs over the years have produced the basis for companies when they come to invest, that they find reliable local talent at the top of their technical capabilities. So that's very attractive to figure out that the people who are going to work here are people who are going to contribute positively to what's being done. The other component is the economy. The cybersecurity market have grown from 13 billion to 15 billion in 1 year, from 24 to 25, and it continues to grow. So you have market stability, you have market growth, you have local capabilities, and you have, that's great components for any investor coming in to say, this is the right place to be because it's sustainable.
Human capital is key in Saudi with the booming young population, and cybersecurity spend at $15 billion. It's just remarkable. Did you anticipate that it would reach this just a few years ago?
Yeah, 15 billion riyal, sorry,
Riyal.
Not dollars, but yes. And this growth is not coming from a vacuum. It's coming from the ecosystem that's attracting the investments in, but also organically. We have a lot of companies that are local companies that are growing. They're growing through their people, they're going through their product, and that growth is going to continue. Yes, it's remarkable, and it's a great place to be.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And Mr. Steed, what methodologies or what frameworks would you say investors are using to evaluate a country's cyber resilience when data and standards differ across markets? The MENA region, for example, is a great example of this, where you have Saudi and the UAE leading in AI and many of the remaining countries lagging behind.
Yeah, you know, the shifting sands of the regulatory environment around the world, I think, are only going to continue. And so where we start from a due diligence process when we're looking at different geographies where we can invest is with what we know. And so we know the NIST cybersecurity framework. We know SOC 2 compliance, which is required by many customers if you are a vendor wanting to sell to them. We are also seeing the rapid emergence of the EU AI Act. And so as these things that we know continue to percolate, continue to grow, they continue to have influence over how products, services, and technologies are developed and sold, we start with that as a baseline. We then compare and contrast that with what the country is implementing, and sometimes they are adopting the NIST cybersecurity framework, or they are requiring their private sector operators to have SOC 2 compliance in place. And what we are looking for is not just the window dressing of, hey, we're doing the best practices, we're doing the commitments to these regulations, we want data sovereignty, we want to be trusted, but that there is a centralized enforcement agency that is going out and is making sure that any time a company is trying to sell to, let's say, a telecommunication operator here in country or selling to the government, that they have the types of controls in place in order to make sure that they remain resilient and trusted for the long term. And this goes back to economic development. It goes back to those goals of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And that's what we continue to see here. And SITE is a great example. Bringing the human capital development and bringing that and aligning it from a security, safety, trust perspective to support those goals, not just so it's a flash in the pan, an overnight unicorn. It's long-term resiliency in the market.
So investors can create benchmarks even in uneven markets.
That's correct. That's correct. And for the last 75 years, we putting this into context, we've seen a system of global alliances that have largely been based on geography and then military might. Well, those global alliances are evolving, and new global alliances are emerging around technology and innovation. And so as those continue to emerge, we are seeing investors, we're seeing private sector operators, we're seeing governments come to a general level of agreement as to what you need as that basic baseline. Now, where it evolves from there, it could go in any different direction based upon the culture of the country, the culture of the region, the level of innovation, or the level of human capital that you have. But at the end of the day, we all need to be speaking the same language, and transparency is key when we're evaluating these types of investments, especially on an international scale.
Mm-hmm. And Mr. Buck, give us an example, if you would, of where you've seen effective regional cooperation in telecom security that really boosted investor confidence.
It's a very pragmatic question, and let me share with you and uncover some valuable insight. Let's take Africa, 54 countries. You have the Smart Africa Alliance, which provides a strong example by harmonizing digital policies across the member states. It reduces fragmentation and creates a more predictable environment. An investor likes predictability. When standards are aligned across borders, the scale of opportunity grows and capital flows. So, in the Middle East, for example, the GCC's joint initiative on cybersecurity, including the shared incident response framework and capacity building program, have helped create a sense of regional resilience. And this doesn't just reassure local stakeholders. It sends a very powerful signal to international capital market that the region is working collectively to manage risk. The lesson here is simple. In the realm of cybersecurity, no nation can stand secure in isolation. And let me insist on this, or even repeat it differently. Cybersecurity is a shared frontier. No country can safeguard its digital domain alone. Threats are global, and so the response must be either regional, cooperative, but harmonized. When governments share information, they align standards and create a sort of regional security framework, they amplify the investor trust. And what investor value is not a mosaic of conflicting regulation, but the clarity and consistency of unified framework they can trust. So there is no digital transformation without digital trust, and that will be the infrastructure to support the development.
So cooperation across borders is what really signals resilience to investors. And Mr. Fattouh, how do advisory bodies like CITE help governments and businesses build transparency and governance needed to really attract this much sought after investment?
Well, it has to do with the goal behind what we do, right? So we don't just do security for the sake of security. Why do you need security? So I gotta ask if anyone here in the audience would be comfortable doing business in a war zone without security, without protection, in a war zone, right? Well, the globe is a cyber war zone. If you put your money somewhere where you can't trust that it's going to be safe, you can't focus on innovation, you can't focus on creating a product, you can't focus on digital transformation. So what we do at CITE is we don't do it to do security for security. We create that safe zone. We create that peace of mind where the investors and the people working in those organizations don't have to worry showing up to work in the morning that their computers are locked up. They don't have to worry that everything that they have created from a customer brand value or from an actual IP value is going to disappear for a ransom attack or a data leak. When you don't have to worry about that, you then focus on what you need to do. You focus on growing the business, focus on creativity, you focus on innovation. That's what we do as advisors. We sit with those organizations, we create that safe environment, we create that platform so that they can focus on growth and innovation.
It underscores how transparency is really key to investor trust. And Mr. Steed, what role do you see both venture capital and private equity playing in shaping global cyber readiness and in shaping trust?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, the power of private capital and certainly venture capital when it comes to innovation is incredibly strong. You know, when we're investing at those early stages, you know, taking the frameworks that we discussed earlier, you know, we are getting down deep into a due diligence process that outlines and has the companies that we are focused on attest to the fact that they are cyber secure or they are cyber safe. They are resilient because ultimately we know when we're investing at that early stage, we're going to be in bed together for the next 5 to 10 years. And we want to make sure that we can trust that this company is going to be able to continue to build over time. And by way of example, one of the things that we created is called the Paladin Trusted Capital Principles and Commitments. We have over 20 VCs from the US as well as the international market that have signed on to these to adopt that same mindset, that same framework, baseline with what you know, then get into diligence on the geography of interest, build long-term trusted relationships with people on the ground. Don't just fly in, fly out trying to deploy capital and find that unicorn. And then continue to build that over time. We call them money trees. If you're successful once, you can then plant another tree. And eventually you get to a forest. And once you get there with that like-minded set of other investors, it then starts to trickle up into private equity. And that power of capital, when you're holding that check, you have an immense amount of power, but you must always respect that power as you're going into these markets. And you know, when it does come to innovation, it's about trust and transparency, and that's how we get to that.
And ultimately about bringing in expertise and strengthening cyber reliance, isn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely. It's those types of technology alliances that we continue to see form. It's not just at the innovation level. You know, it has to be done in cooperation with government, with academia, with the private sector, large organizations, small organizations. It's an entire life cycle approach. And once you start that engine, if it really gets going, it then unlocks a level of capital that most places don't generally see. And I think with safety, security, and trust, particularly with what the kingdom has done in such a short period of time, you know, I think we're going to continue to see that commitment of capital from not just the local ecosystem and the local government, but then from that international ecosystem as well.
I just want to reiterate a very good point Chris made, which is the ecosystem. it's not a single answer. There is no single component that gets success, that gets stability. It is the government in the regulator body having the vision to regulate and create the roadmap for people to follow. It is the government support from a vision, a strategic vision that exists to push the institutions, the educational institutions to create the capital needed, the human capital. And it's the private sector investing in that ecosystem. So all of that, and that's an excellent point. What's happened here in Saudi, the Saudi model, has not been just one single thing that worked. It has been multiple components that worked well together.
Collaboration between public and private sector and academia.
Absolutely.
And Mr. Ba, how would you say telecom players can collaborate with governments to credibly signal readiness to international investors?
That was just addressed right now. Telecom operators and government working hand in hand. That's the vision. Some call it ambitious. I would say we just call it the next agenda. The answer lies in becoming together co-architect of trust. And clearly to your question, this requires joint action on several fronts. First, by developing cyber readiness framework with measurable benchmarks. Investors respond to numbers. If government and operators can point to independent report or scorecards, it provides reassurance to the investor. Second, by practicing more transparency. Investors don't expect perfection. They know incident will occur again and again and again. What they want to see is how quickly systems are restored and how clearly information is shared and how accountability is enforced. Third, by creating regulatory sandboxes where new cybersecurity solutions could be tested in partnership with regulators. The advantage is this reduces uncertainties for innovators, demonstrate to investors that governments are open to progress while at the same time keeping safeguards in place. Finally, by investing together in human capital, which means talent and skills, cyber resilience is ultimately about people, engineers, analysts, and leaders who can anticipate and respond to threats. Therefore, joint initiative between telecom operators and government to train and to retain cyber talent, that sends a strong message that resilience is not only a policy priority, but a sustainable reality. When government and telecom, they align in this way, the signal to investor is powerful. This is a market that is secured, transparent, and future-ready. So we would love to see more cooperation, more alignment, and agreeing on the sequences on action between policymakers and regulators and the private sector. And as mentioned, private sector is the one doing the investment in the digital development.
Ultimately, joint signaling between these sectors builds credibility abroad. And Mr. Fattouh, what steps can investors take to really strengthen trust and achieve sustainable returns while driving the local market growth that's just so important?
Well, I think that we need to change the mentality of how business is being done here. Investors come in and they traditionally has been an issue of, here you go, I want you to consume this, here's my product, go out and sell it in your market. I want to access your market segment through you taking my product and just spreading it around. I don't think that's going to work anymore. We need to understand and recognize that the Saudi market has reached a level of maturity and capability that we are looking now to be co-creators and co-investors and innovators with the IP. So something I'm very proud of is that at site we've done this, we started this journey a few years back, and we're about to now launch the first Saudi IP for a next generation firewall and XDR, so Rakin and Mitras. Now, all of these are Saudi IPs, but they were not created from scratch. We did them through partnerships. Rakin was a partnership with An Labs. Mitras's partnership with Verify from the US. But we own the IP jointly. We are invested in creating the success story for that IP jointly with our partners. I think that's really the model to be next. I mean, if you look, and again, by the way, we're looking at Saudi as just a starting point. We have global ambition. If you look at the other brands that we all very well know, Norton, Samsung, any of the names that well known right now, where did they start? They started in the local market. Then they met the criteria of quality and they met a global need, and then they became a global name. We in Saudi are looking to do that next because there's nothing that prevents us from doing it.
Well, congratulations on the launch of this IP, a huge move for Saudi. And we have run out of time, but just one final quick question for all. The single most important action governments or companies can take to align cybersecurity with long-term investor confidence, Mr. Ba.
In closing, if I had to highlight one single action that matters most, it would be this: to make cybersecurity today a leadership priority, not at a cost to be managed quietly in an IT department, not a box to be ticked for compliance, but a central pillar of national and corporate economic strategy. Why it's important? Because investors want to know that leaders, both in government and in business, they take cybersecurity seriously at the very top. They want to see budget allocated, regulation enforced, result reported. That visible prioritization is what gives them confidence that risks are managed, opportunities are sustainable, and that their capital, most importantly, is protected. We must, and I will close on that, Madam Chair, we must remember cybersecurity is not the enemy of investment. It is the enabler of trust in investment. And in today's interconnected world, opportunity and resilience go together. Cybersecurity has become the guarantor of stability and the foundation of investment trust.
Very well said. Thank you. Mr. Steed.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we've touched on it at least a little bit. Trust and transparency. What are the requirements and how are companies building into those requirements? That then equates to cooperation and collaboration. And when we think about cooperation and collaboration from a quantified perspective, that is true long-term value creation.
I think the question, if there's a lot of times where you hear this in the boardroom or in discussions, can we afford to invest in cybersecurity? And I believe the real question is, can we afford not to invest in cybersecurity? Because at the time that you are looking at anything from growth, stability, innovation, digital transformation, it is a basic requirement. It has not become a nice to have anymore. It's a must have. And the sooner that the boardrooms realize that, the better that their future will look like.
I think everyone echoes your sentiments, and I think the key takeaway here today is that cybersecurity is central to investor confidence. Thank you so much for being here today and for your insights. Thank you.